You may notice I am not Ranksk. That's because I'm his sister and I'm taking over his channel just for this one video. He's the one that got me into cracking the cryptic and to creating Sudoku and all the joys of logic puzzles, and so I thought I'd try to beat him at his own game. I don't think I'll succeed. He's much smarter than me, but he's gracious enough to give me a little airtime. So I have created my own puzzle. I call it a Killer Doku, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to solve it. I called it a Doku because one of my other favorite logic puzzles is the nonogram, also known as a cross sums, and I've been thinking for a while about how I might combine nonograms and Sudoku, and this is what I came up with. Killer Sudoku happens to be my personal favorite variant, and so it was natural to use Killer as the basis for my new variant. First, the rules. So normal Sudoku rules apply. Obviously, that means the digits 1 to 9 appear in every row, column, and 3 by 3 box without repeating. Normal Killer Sudoku rules apply, which means that you are given certain cages, for example this one, with a small number in the top left corner. The digits inside the cage need to add up to that number without repeating. Now, the twist here is that I haven't actually given you the cages. I've only given you the top left corner or the top left cell of every cage, and it's your job to determine where all the cages are. And to do that, you need my new rules. First of all, the digits in the top row and the leftmost column indicate how many cells in that row or column contain cage cells. Meaning, for example, in this row, there are 4 of the 9 cells in this row will be in cages, and 5 of them are out of cages. They don't all have to be in the same cage, and they don't have to touch each other. Another rule is that every cage is completely contained within its given box. So you're never going to have, for example, 17 cages and going to cross over into box 8 from box 5. Yeah, 5. It's going to stay completely within box 5. Also, every given cage cell is the leftmost cell of the topmost row of its cage. So for example, this 12 cage could never go left. It could never go up. It can only go to the right and or down. It can go left after it goes down, but it can't go left from where it is. And finally, we have these palindromes. Gray lines are palindromes, and that means that the digits on them need to read the same in either direction. So for example, you might have this little guy, could be 5. Whoops, I seem to be in color mode. Could be 5, 6, 5, 5, which obviously isn't valid because I'm repeating digits, but that's the idea. Now, the rule with these particular palindromes is that every cell on a given palindrome is either always in a cage cell or always outside a cage cell. So for example, this palindrome starts in a cage cell, so that means all 3 cells on it are cage cells. And that is the rules. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is try to identify some of the obvious cage cells. And I'm going to color the in cage cells green and the out of cage cells gray. And then later we will use different colors for different cages in order to differentiate them. So we have these obvious ones. There's a 9. There's 9 cells. They must all be cage cells. And then we have the same thing here. A 9 cells. They all must be cage cells. Now that means that this one in the corner, which counts for both the column and the row, already have their single cage cell, and so the rest of the row and the rest of the column cannot be cage cells. Oops. Okay, now that takes care of the 8 in this column because 8 of the 9 cells need to be cage cells. What's going on? I'm having a terrible time with my control key. There we go. Ah. Those are green. Okay. Now we have a couple of palindromes and we know where they are now. So we know that this long palindrome is completely out of cages. So we can mark those. And we know these palindromes are completely in cages. So we can mark those. We also know, of course, that all of the given cage cells are cage cells, oddly enough. Okay. Now this 7 is fulfilled because only 2 of the cells in this column would be outside the cages, so we can fill those in. And then this 2 is fulfilled because we have 2 cells already marked as cage cells, so we can fill the rest in as not cage. We can fill in the 5 on this palindrome. It's the third one from this end, so therefore the third one from this end must be a 5. Oop, that is not a 5. That is yellow. Sorry. Okay, down to 5. And we only have 2 more digits left in the top row, and they must be 2 or 4. And if we follow the palindrome around, the second digit on the other end of this palindrome cannot be a 2. Therefore, this cannot be a 2 and must be a 4. And we can fill in both 4s. And therefore, this is a 2. Okay, now we can start looking at the individual cages. So the 15 cage, a 15 cage obviously can't be one cell because you can't put 15 into one cell, so it has to be at least 2 cells. And because of our rule about all of the cages being contained within their boxes, there are only 2 possible cells it could be in, so we can mark that. Now, column 3 is fulfilled because it's supposed to have 3 cage cells, and it does, so we can mark that off. And we now know this palindrome is an out palindrome, so we can do that. The 1, 2, 3, 4 digits left in this column are 3, 6, 7, and 8. Oops. I'm bad at clicking. Okay. Now, this row already has more than 3 cage cells in it, so it can't be a 3. And if we look, it's at the other end of this palindrome. It can't be a 6 either because of the 6 in the same box, so we can remove the 6. So we know this row is going to have 1 or 2 more cage cells in it. Next, the 29 cage in box 3 is the only cage in its box, and it can't be divided. This cell can't be an out cell because then it would imply that there are 2 cages in this box, but there's only 1. So this must be a cage cell. And that is the entire 29 cage. So we're going to make it another color so we can show that it's identified. We can do the same with the 15 cage. We know that one's identified. And over here, we have a 12 cage, and it's the only cage in its box, and a 12 cage can't be a single cell, so it's got to connect to the other cage cell in the box and be green, and now we have identified that it is a 3-cell 12 cage, and we'll make that a different color. How's, I don't know, what is that, purple? Okay. Now, here's a little bit of fun. We know this 12 cage must be at least 2 cells, and there's only one place it can go. So we know these 2 cells go together. We don't necessarily know if it, well, we do know that it goes here because we know that the 3, even though it could be 2 cells, can't go up from here. So this cell can't belong to anyone else, so it must also belong to the 12 cage. So we'll color that. Okay. Now, the 24 cage, we don't know yet how the 13 and 24 interact. 13 can be as many as 4 cells, but not 5, and 24 can be as few as 3 cells and as many as, I think, 6. Is that right? Yeah, can't be 7, but it can be 6. So we don't know the distribution of this cage yet. But we do know that an 18 cage has to be at least 3 cells, because 2 cells, the biggest number you can make is 17. And so it must take at least these 3. So we can mark that. And we don't know which cage this cell belongs to. It could belong to the 8 or the 18, so we're going to leave that one alone. However, the 8 cell is the only cage that can take this cage cell. So even though 8 could be a single cell, we know it's not in this case. So we'll have to figure out who this belongs to a little later, but we can mark the 8 as at least 2 cells. And then over here, we know the 19 cage has to be at least 3 cells. We could be more, but we know it's at least 3, so we'll mark that. And the 9, we actually don't know. 9 can be 1 cell, so we're going to leave that one alone for now. And then finally, this 19 is hemmed in. It can only be 3 cells, so we will make that one purple. Okay. So we've done a little bit of work. Now, column 8 now has 2 cage cells in it, and it needs 2, so we can gray out the rest of this column. And oh, look at that. Now we know this 19 cage is also hemmed in, and this 9 cage must be all 3. So we will color that one. What are we doing here? Purple. Okay, and now we have the same thing with the 13 cage. We can see it can't go over here because the 24 is in the way, and it's used all of its possible cells. So we can mark that one. And then the 24 cage must take the rest of the box. Oh, I'm going to need another color. How about yellow? Now we can see that the row 3, which we didn't know if it was going to be 7 or 8 cells, is in fact 8 cells. It's full now, so we can put the 8 there. And more important, well, additionally importantly, we can fill in the other end of its palindrome with an 8 as well. Now here, this 15 cage, there's only 2 ways to make 15 in 2 cells, and there are only 2 cells left to fill in the box, and fortunately, they add up to 15. So 6 and 9 there. Now we can remove 8 as options from these 3 boxes, not 3, 8, from these 3 boxes. And this row now has considerably more than 3 cage cells in it, so it can't be a 3 either. So now we just have to figure out which one of these has 3, and we know that this one has 6 or 7, and it only has, well, it already has 6 now, so we just need to find out whether this particular cell is a cage or is not a cage, and we'll find that out later. Since we have 9s here and here, we can pencil in 9s here in row 2 for what it's worth. Now we're going to do a little math. So any given box in a Sudoku, or row, or column contains the digits 1 to 9, and if you've watched Cracking the Cryptic even 2 or 3 times, you know that the digits 1 to 9 add up to 45, and that is a very powerful number in Killer Sudoku. So we know this whole box is going to add up to 45. We know that 13 plus 24 is 37. 45 minus 37 is 8. So these 2 boxes, these 2 cells must add up to 8, and we have a 5. So the other digit must be a 3. Boom. Now, that means something. Oh, the nice thing is to learn a few simple rules for Killer Sudoku. You don't have to learn every box combination. That's a lot, but knowing a few things can be helpful where you don't have to look up every possible combination every time you do one. And one of those things is that a 19 cage in 3 cells can never contain a 1, because if it did, you would need 18 more in 2 cells, and we already established that isn't possible. You'd have to use 2 9s. So we know that this 19 cage does not contain a 1, and we also know it doesn't contain a 2, because if it did, it would need 8 and 9 to make 17 for its other 2 cells, and there's already a 9 in the column. That pushes a 2 into this 9 cage. Okay. Now, that means that this 13 cage must have the 2 in box 6, because we have a 2 over here and we have a 2 up here. Now, once you have a 2 in a 13 cage, 13 minus 2, knowledge bomb, is 11. And there are a few ways to make 11 in 2 cells, and we only have one option here. One way is 2 plus 9, but we've already used a 2, and there's a 9 in the column. The next is 3 plus 8, but there's a 3 in the box. The next is 4 plus 7, which we can do. So we can put in 2, 4, 7. And the last is 5 plus 6, and there's a 5 in the box. So now we know the approximate makeup of this 13 cage. And we can do a little more work with that. We can put the 2, 4, 7 over here as well, because we're going to be able to eliminate a few things at some point, knowing that. And we can fill in the 24 cage, why not? Now, you can see there's an 8 here in this column, which rules out these 3 cells from being 8. We already figured out that none of these cells can be 8, and therefore the 8 in this box must go here. And the final three digits in this box must be 1, 4, and 9. Now this is important because reasons. I was trying to figure out why this made sense. Why this didn't make sense, and then I realized, of course, that's not a 4 because we already have a 4 in the box. It is indeed a 6. Now, we can look back here for a second here. There's a 4 in the box, so there can't be a 4 at this end of the palindrome, so therefore there can't be a 4 at this end of the palindrome, and there's a 7 in the row here, so there is not a 7 here. Continuing with our eliminations, I neglected to notice the 4 in this row. This must be a 2, and therefore this must be a 7, and this must be a 4, and we can fill in this 7 as well. Now 4 is limited to the 12 cage, and it can't be here because of this 4 as I noticed, so this must be a 4. Now with a 4 in the 12 cage, we need 8 more, and 8 can be made in 3 ways. 1, 7, which we can't do because of the 7. 3, 5, which we can do for the moment, so we'll put that in. And 2, 6, which we also can do, so we'll put those in as well. Now we'll come down here and fill in these options. 2, 6, 3, 5. And that makes sense because this is an 8 cage of at least 2 cells, so that fits. Now there is a 5 in this row, so we can take this 5 out, and since we're taking the 5 out from there, we take it out from here, and therefore we take the 3 out of this one. Okay. Now 2 cannot be, we're saying where can the 2 go in box 2, I guess I should say. Can't go in the top row because it's filled. Can't go in the middle row because of the 2 in the row already, which means it must be in the 12 cage. And since we already know there's a 7 in the 12 cage, that means we need 5 more, and 2 needs 3 more to make 5. 5 minus 2 is 3, so these 2 are a 2, 3 pair. That means we can fill in the rest of this row with 1, 4, I'm not going to get this wrong this time, and 5. And of course we have a 5 here, so we can get rid of that. Okay. We can also get rid of the 4 here because of the 4 in the column. Oh, hello? 4. There we go. So even though we don't know much about these 2 rows, what we do know is there cannot be a 1 in a 19 cage. We talked about that. And therefore we know that the 1 in box 7 must be in this column, but the 1 over here tells us it's not in this cell, and it's not at the end of its palindrome, which means it's not at the other end of the palindrome, which means that is the only place for a 1 in box 7. How nice. If we look at box 4, we can see that 1 has to go in one of those 2 cells, and so does 5, because 5 cannot be over here. So we have a nice 1, 5 pair there. Now let's finish this row off, because we know basically what goes here. We know that 1 and 9 are left in this box, so let's fill those in. And we know 3 and 7 are left in this box, and there's a 7 that tells us which way they go. So let's fill those in. 3 and 7. Let's clean up some more pencil marks while we're looking at this. Because of the 1 in the 1, 6, 9 triple here, we can't have a 1 here. And I think Mark calls that a chocolate teapot triple. I really like Mark's expressions. And then because of the 9 in the row here, we can't have a 9 here. Let's ask where the 1 can go in column 7. We have 1 pencil marked here, and then we already talked about this. You can't have a 1 in a 3-cell 19 cage. And since all of the other cells are now filled, we know this is the 1, and that gives us the rest of this box. Now, that forces the 19 cage, which now is 5, 6, and 8. That's 11 plus 8 is 19. I was just making sure. And these 3 cells must be 1, 7, and 9. And the 9 cage must be 2, 3, 4. Like that. Now we have a 1 here and here, so in fact we know the 1 goes here. And we can take it out of here. Okay. Let's come back here to our 8 and 18 ambiguity. Now that we've got it down to 2 possibilities, we can actually figure out how big this 18 cage needs to be. So if this were a 1, we would need 8 more, and the 8 would have to be here, and it can't be. And if this were a 5, that makes 14, we would need 4 more, so we'd have to put a 4 here, and we can't. That means this cell must be part of the 18 cage, which means the 8 cage is only 2 cells. And we can figure out what those cells are. Now, it would need, if this was a 1, we would need a 7 here. We already know there isn't a 7 here. If it's a 5, we need a 3 here. So there we go. We got 5 and 3. And then we get the 3 over here as well. And we remember we needed 8 more here as well. So we get another 3, 5 combo. And we get a 1 here and a 6 here. And we can finish this row with a 2. Now we can finish the 18 cage. 9 and 1 is 10, plus 2 is 12, so we need 6 more. So that's a 6. And that makes this a 7, and we can finally fill in this cell. It is an in cell, so we will make it green. Now, who does it belong to? It must belong to the 17, because obviously we already know the 3 can't go to the left. So we're going to mark the 17 cage now, I guess in yellow. The 17 cage could continue, we don't know yet. It could go down and take this 7. So we're going to leave that alone for now. We're going to clean up some more pencil marks. So this can no longer be a 6. And this can no longer be a 6. And we're left with a 1, 9 pair in that box. We also now know the 3 cannot be a standalone cage because there's a 3 in its row. So we know the only place it can go is down. So we are going to go ahead and highlight that. Oh, I need another color. Look at that. How about we'll just leave it green. And a 3 cage can never be more than 2 cells, because 1 plus 2 is 3, and what are you going to put in more cells? So we know this is a 1, 2 pair. And we know there need to be 4 cage cells in this row. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that means those are not cage cells. And that means the 17 is a 2-cell cage, and there's only one way to do that, 8 plus 9. And we have an 8 in the column to tell us which way they go. And we can fill in this cell. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a 6. Cool. And we can fill in this cell too, I just realized. That's an 8. And we have a 2 here, so we can do 1 and 2. And now we have the 1, so we can do 9 and 1. And we are coming up to the end here. So we need 5 cage cells in this column, and we have how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, and we only have 1 more that could be, so we're going to go ahead and put that one in. Oh look, now we have 4 cage cells in this column, this row, so this cannot be a 3, clearly. Now there's only one place for the 3, it's here, and this one, by process of elimination, must be 6. And since we already have 3 cage cells in this row, we can turn those off. And we still need 1 more cage cell in this column, and we need, oh look, we need 2 more cage cells in this column, and we have 2 more cells, so let's fill those in. Now, the 26 cage is the only cage in this box, and as before, we can't separate it, so it has to take one of these 2 cells, and now we know which. We already have 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's not a cage cell. And we only have 5, the same 5, in this row, so that must be a cage cell. And now we have finally identified all of our cages. We have all this information, we have a little more cleaning up to do. We have a 1 in this column, so we now know the order of the 9, 1 pair here. We know the 3 is here, so this must be a 2 and a 3. And we have a 6 here, so this must be 9 and 6. And we are kind of in the home stretch at this point. We can clean up some of these. That can't be a 5. I hope you can see why. That can't be a 6. That can't be a 3. And let's see, this 19 cage is in fact now forced to be 289, unlike its friend over here that couldn't be. And the last 2 digits here are 4 and 7, and we cannot disambiguate those, but what's interesting is that means this is also 4 or 7. Obviously, they can't all three be the same digit because those two are in the same column. So we're going to have to figure out whether this is a 4 or a 7 and that, or this, and that's going to give us the rest of the palindrome. Let's finish column 5 now. The last two digits we need are 2 and 6, and we've got a 6 here to tell us which way they go. So we've got 2 and 6. And let's go ahead and finish columns 4 and 6 while we're here. So we can have 4, 7, and 9. Oh, why aren't you typing? 4, 7, and 9. And over here we need 3, 5, and 8. And that can't be a 3, that can't be a 5. Now this gives us a 4, 7, 9 triple in row 8, which means that can't be a 4, and that can't be a 9. We have a 6 here, which I neglected to clean up earlier. That gives us a 5-8 pair here, means this is a 6. Oops. 6. We now have a 5-8 pair also in row 7, so this can't be an 8. Now here's a little fun right at the end. Because we know that one of these must contain a 9, we can do a little, we can have a little fun here. Let's imagine this were a 4. What will that do? That will give us a 7-9 pair here. It also gives us a 7-9 pair in this row, which eliminates the 7 from this box. Now we already, or this cell, we already said we can't have the same digit in all 3 spots on the palindrome. Therefore, that can't be a 4. It must be a 7. So we have a 7 there and a 7 at the other end, making this a 4. So we can now clean up this, must be a 9, because it sees a 4 and a 7. This sees a 7 and a 9, so it must be a 4. That removes the 4 from over here. Now we have a 2-3 pair, forces the 4 into this box. I'm going to go a little fast now because we're right at the end. We have this 7, tells us this is a 9. This is a 7. This is a 2, 8, 9, 3, here we go, 3, 2, and we've got this 5-8 deadly pattern. A deadly pattern means that whichever order we put these in, the rest of the puzzle would not change, which means the puzzle would technically have 2 solutions. It could be 5, 8, 5, 8, or 8, 5, 8, 5. But fortunately, this puzzle does have a unique solution because this 5, 8 is inside the 26 cage, so we can use simple arithmetic to figure out whether it's a 5 or an 8, and that's going to finish the puzzle. So 9 and 4 is 13, 15, 18, we need 8 more. 8, 5, 8, 5, and we're done. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you to my brother for letting me steal some of his thunder. I promise I won't do it very often. This was hard. And I hope you keep subscribe and like and comment and everything else to give my brother the praise he deserves. And see y'all later.